So I was listening to Joshua Phillips from Epoch Times. Crossroads, I've mentioned him before. I love his question answer that he does at the end of his show. You normally need a subscription to it because he explained things, and his knowledge of history is it's fascinating. So he was talking about that oftentimes we look at something and say that's the problem, we just have to fix that part of the problem. But really the problem is, no, we're not arguing about the right things. So there's one side that wants to argue that capitalism is bad, which he says that I don't think they really realize that we're not living under capitalism. We're living under crony capitalism. And so and he said this goes back it's all through history. We're living under socialism. I think that's pretty true at this point. So he had used this word syndicalism, and I had never heard of it. And he said syndicalism is socialism through national unions. And that's not the only part, though. So people have heard the term the public-private partnership, right? So basically, this is probably an easier way to look at it. And I was typing down exactly what he was saying or trying to. He said the problem with capitalism is crony capitalism and state interventionism. And we mistake this as being part of the capitalist system, and it's not the true free enterprise system that we're supposed to live under. He said it's the interventionist policies and crony capitalism. Government interventionists have brought in socialist elements. These two systems are trying to squeeze us, one being big government and the other being big business, both trying to seize from us independence. And as I said, the syndicalism uses national unions who then work with the government to enact a political system. He said this history has been lost. The big businesses that become big corporate and then form monopolies. And as we're seeing now, it's gone into the area of we have technocrats. And basically the technocrats is your technology, and they are enacting socialism through online and technology. The mass surveillance everywhere, the online censoring of speech. This is forcing socialism onto the American people. And he said that basically every country in the world has been operating under a lot of socialistic systems. And they've come in through corporate because he also said that the way it ends up happening is the corporate monopolies and national unions and with big government then create what we live under. He said corporate law has given these monopolies too much control and too much protection. I couldn't agree more with that. He said national unions are not independent. I couldn't agree with that anymore. They get government money and they have deep political ties. Yes, that's why they have American Nurses Association was a union. And they probably still are, but they have gotten way too big and they're out of control. But that's why I've said for a couple of years now, when I would sit back and look at the whole system, like where is the problem really? Where is the problem here? Because it's not a the political parties are they're part of the problem too. But anyway, I'm not getting into that. But we're not living under our Constitution. Hasn't anybody thought about this, how, and it's a fine line here, but how when you go to work, your constitutional rights end at the door. They do. Obviously you shouldn't be able to just spew whatever you want out of your mouth, like free speech when you're at work. But then I watched how, I was at Northwestern at the time, but all the hospitals were doing it in Illinois, became this political entity. And it was like, oh, so that's who you guys are now. You are the brown shirts. You are. You're not science anymore. You're not about medicine. You're not about protecting people. You're not about safety. CDC's not about safety. No, it's all about power and control. And then you get these people, okay, that put these cameras in all these hospitals like where I work, and you know they're watching you, and then they come off, you know, like say the head of infection control at your hospital is just a douche, really just a douche, because they try to act like that they support you, but they don't, because the only time they ever talk to you is to tell you you've done something wrong. Like this, it's like not America. But then, you know, I leave there and I'm supposedly living in America, but this kind of corporation, this hospital is supposed to be somehow in America, like they somehow have some right to be existing when they're horrible, completely horrible. Like, how is this America? And it's getting worse. It is getting worse. And I don't care what side of the political aisle you're on. Both sides are doing it. It has to end. We cannot have all of these associations dictating what the standard of care in nursing will be, what the standard of care in medicine will be. Things need to go back to independent communities, so then they're serving their actual communities and not on some global fucking scale. Excuse my French. The globalist thing there's nothing about globalism that makes any sense at all, except for people that want to force tyranny on others. So he said, when we see something wrong or broken, we think it's just that one thing. When in reality, it's two big things, which is big government and big corporate. That's where it's broken, is those two ends that are squeezing us. And that's why years ago, when I started seeing the hospitals monopolized, it was terrifying to me, because I know anybody who knows just the basics about monopolies knows that, yeah, there's like McDonald's has a monopoly. Many things do. Gas stations, 7-Eleven, whatever. But there's certain rules within those monopolies, like where they can be located. You know, that's why I've said it before, why you will always see a Burger King and a McDonald's across the street from each other, almost always, because they're competing, and that's okay. But what the hospital systems were doing, and they have so much power and control, they were in with that federal trade. They're the Federal Trade Commission that decides if they can monopolize. They were in with them because I've said it before, the CEO for was it Evanston Hospital then? Or it's still there, North Shore Hospital. The CEO way back, I don't know if it's still the same CEO. He said under oath that the CEO of Northwestern, this was the CEO that I had when I was working at Northwestern. He told him, because that CEO that said this under oath, he said that Northwestern came to him and said, let's merge. And they're very close to each other. So the CEO of North Shore said, I don't think the Federal Trade Commission will allow us to because of our locations. And that CEO, the same one that, was there when they played all their games with me, anyway, said we have ways around the Federal Trade Commission. Oh, well. And it was in the paper. I forget what he was on the stand for, what the whole mess was about. But the point is that I'm sure that CEO at Northwestern wasn't the only one that's in with the Federal Trade Commission, because again, it's a public-private partnership. So when your healthcare system monopolizes, there is nothing good about it, because it is only capitalism, the free enterprise system, that is what will make sure you have good health care. But now we have the National Nurses United, which they're not even national. Like, there's a ton of nurses that see the writing on the wall with the nursing unions. They do. But there's a ton of people that think that unions are the way to go. No, it's one of the things that's squeezing people. That's why I said, if your employers if they weren't given all of these corporate protections, then this wouldn't be happening, because what happens is the unions end up working for the very people you're fighting against. They're the ones keeping you under control. So we need to see what is really broken, as Joshua Phillips says.